people who struggle the most with understanding Bitcoin are typically the most educated or successful in our current economic paradigm. And all of the individual building blocks that make up this grander macro thesis are indisputable, like housing prices as an example. But something happens there when you put it all together, it just breaks the brain. Some people can't grok it. It's that cognitive dissonance. What kind of transition do we have there with that level of resistance with people who are effectively incentivized to not understand it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it will greatly depend on where people are living. So if you guys have talked to Tony Yazbek from the Bitcoin Way, Tony was living in Lebanon when the Lebanese pound collapsed, and he has a very different experience from myself. And so I think as we start to see currency events, the ability for people to ignore Bitcoin is in those places is going to become harder. And, where those events are staved off further out, those, ordinary people are still going to observe you and me and Robert. Our lives are getting easier all the time, and we're experiencing more abundance and more enjoyment and all these things. And that's going to, I think, also be difficult for people to ignore. Mm-hmm. So if Saylor's right, if all these things, and we just continue to chug along, I think what those ideas don't consider are all the individual people and how they're going to interact with this phenomenon as they're experiencing it in real time. So, but yeah, I mean, the average life expectancy of a fiat currency outside of the Western world is 22 years. Like we are all just operating under this idea that money has been a certain way for the entire time we've been alive, so it will continue to be that way. And that's actually just not how it's been for most of human history. There's another one of these ideas that it can be very wild to imagine something being totally different from how it is now, but that doesn't make it impossible. It just means that it's going to be very different.
It's just outside the Overton window.
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with here. People, nothing's ever happened like this, right? We had gold monetized over a 5,000 year course, basically. It wasn't fully globally monetized until probably the 1800s.
Yeah.
That took a long time.
I mean, ideas,
15 years into this thing.
Yeah, and ideas, the spreading rate of idea transmission is accelerating.
Yeah,
that's just factually true.
The liquidity of ideas is the term I use, but in digital age, they fly freely.
Totally. I mean, I think about it I think, it's like email, right? There would be no way to go around to companies or countries or whoever and tell them no more email, we're using physical mail only. That idea is cooked, right? It's out of the bag. And it's also a good example because almost nobody understands how email actually works either.
Yeah.
They just know you hit send and it arrives in the other person's inbox, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and we lived through this. We're all kind of the same age. When I started university, people were email was just becoming a thing. And I never even knew to check an email from my professor. And by the time I started my working career, it was an impossible thing. You couldn't have a job without having email be a regular part of your day. So if you think about that in Bitcoin terms, we might be at 1995 of email in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, then by 2030, it's these objects in the rearview mirror are way closer than they appear.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. It's also an open source protocol, right? Is it SMTP that underpins? Yeah. So that's what Bitcoin is, right? It's just another open source protocol.
Yeah.
Instead of moving mail, you're moving purchasing power, which is a trip, but
in a borderless way. I was, thinking about this the other day. I don't know, even if in Bitcoin we appreciate the elegance of the innovation of having a form of money that is universal and truly borderless. Mm-hmm. And this is another one of those things where a lot of, the Western conversation around Bitcoin is people who've grown up in countries that don't really have stiff capital controls. If I really wanted to move to another country, I could probably get most of my money there. And so these things aren't necessarily so relevant to us, but a lot of the reason why maps look the way they do now is they've been designed in a way to keep the money inside, and it evolved out of these, monarchies like we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. So this system then we transitioned who was in charge, but the system has the entire time been trying to design to keep us enslaved and keep the money exactly where it is. So now we have this tool that like really does enable us, if we're desperate enough, to leave with all the money you have in the world stored with 12 or 24 words in your head. And I think that is another thing that could fundamentally force a reimagination of what the state is. This is like there are lots of, James Dale and Ayn Rand and Bitcoiners are into this stuff too, right? It's like the modern state, in large part, it has a reason for thinking. The reason it thinks it needs to exist is to protect us, because historically that was what a lot of what the state was offering, right? Protecting your private property. But we've dematerialized private property into something that's almost impossible to confiscate, and as a result of that, we've also negated that. Thanks, but I don't really need that anymore.
I love the unconfiscatability, or the difficult in confiscating Bitcoin. I think that really changes that social memory function of money we were just talking about. Because the other problem is, like with gold, if someone did have a lot of money, you actually don't know, is that social memory or is that asocial memory, right? Did this guy, when I say asocial, like not social, did he go out and just coerce a lot of people and, kill people and steal all that gold? Mm-hmm. Or is this a social memory that he actually contributed useful work to society? You're not really sure on a gold standard because gold's physical and you can't know. But with Bitcoin, it seems much more likely that anyone that has acquired a lot of Bitcoin has done it consensually and non-coercively.
That's interesting.
And so then you start to see that, again, you're reunifying maybe wealth and virtuosity in a way. It's like, well, people that are actually wealthy on a Bitcoin standard have done something useful for other people because there was no other option to acquire it in an unuseful or asocial way.
Yeah, Eric was asking this question earlier about like what are the sweeping civilizational changes we could expect, and I think this is totally one of these waterfall ideas where if it all of a sudden just makes more sense for everybody to cooperate, and there's not much point in harming each other because you're not going to receive a financial benefit from it, that on its own is a pretty big thing. But then if you're really only going to get value for going out and producing value, then now you put those two things together and you really have something that looks very different from how things are now. Like,
yes,